What's good, gamers? Aquilon here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you. In today's video, we're talking about the new player experience of World of Warcraft, and very specifically talking about this because yesterday during the live stream over on Twitch, by the way, you can join there. Links are in the description down below. Someone asked about this. We basically started having a conversation, and the whole chat, obviously, everyone had opinions on this. But everyone sort of agrees that the new player experience for World of Warcraft is a bit of a dud. It's really difficult for a new player to get into World of Warcraft. We just recently got some incredible numbers from Ballila's video that basically says that there's over 7 million players in World of Warcraft. Now, to be clear, we don't know if that is for Classic Season of Discovery or if that is for retail, but my guess would be that it certainly will translate into either, and I also don't think Blizzard makes any real distinction. It's quite clear to me, and if you allow me a little bit of a tangent, it's clear to me that Classic is no longer just an experiment from Blizzard's perspective. It is now a viable game mode. It's part of the World of Warcraft universe, and I can absolutely see Blizzard sort of trying to implement the Classic system, so the system of bringing old expansions back in their actual form, eventually maybe being tied into something like Chromie time once they're done with it. And the reason I'm saying this just very quickly, as I said, allow me a little bit of a tangent, is Cataclysm Classic now being announced and also being worked on and soon will be released. I have always said, literally since the first announcement of Classic WoW being Classic WoW, that Cataclysm they should stop before Cataclysm. The thing is, when people think about the Classic WoW experience, what they're looking for is that Classic experience, the experience of, the super hardcore world, the heavy RPG elements that used to exist in the earliest versions of World of Warcraft. That is what they like, and it shows when Season of Discovery was decided to be placed, like Blizzard chose to place it in Classic, Vanilla Classic, rather than in Wrath of the Lich King, where they would have far more time, far more levels that they could go with, and even far more things that they could ultimately do. But Classic seems to be the only one, or Classic seems to be the only one that is truly successful. I remember people playing the crap out of Classic, and then when TBC came out, people played it for a little bit, but a lot of people almost instantly went back to Classic and just kept replaying Classic. And then Wrath came out, and Wrath was actually a bit more of a dud almost, because yes, it was somewhat successful, and yes, everyone wanted to play it again because, people miss the old days and nostalgia is there. But again, people very quickly migrated back to original Classic. And I don't think it's because the gameplay is necessarily superior to that of Wrath of the Lich King. I think, broadly speaking, most people agree. Wrath of the Lich King was really when World of Warcraft hit its perfection stride. In terms of gameplay, classes were a lot more fleshed out, the world felt a lot better, leveling was a lot more streamlined than it ever was before, even though TBC already did a lot of work around streamlining it. It wouldn't be until Wrath that you truly had a streamlined and pretty fun experience that wasn't just, very, very oppressive. And yet it turns out that, people don't care, right? They want the very oppressive, very difficult leveling experience in Classic. And even though Season of Discovery does make leveling easier in terms of catching up, people still prefer the old world, right? So Cataclysm as a Classic experiment has never made sense to me. Because once you get into Cataclysm, you are starting to enter what we could probably refer to as the modern era of World of Warcraft. Yes, of course, Classic gameplay was very different to today, but it was already very similar to what we have today in terms of how the classes are designed, how the talent systems work. Talent trees were massively condensed. At that point, leveling was made a lot easier than it was even in Wrath. The world was a lot more as you would expect it to be today. So the only thing I can think of with Cataclysm is twofold. So the one reason is Blizzard have something up their sleeve with the cut content of Cataclysm, and eventually they want to do something similar to Season of Discovery, only this time sort of like maybe the reformation of Cataclysm, and that could be super successful. Imagine if after like a year of Cataclysm Classic being out, Blizzard announces the Reformation patch. And this is a patch where all of that COD content, because remember, Cataclysm is one of the expansions with the most cut content in the game ever. Entire zones, entire raids, entire dungeons were cut from the expansion because Blizzard just didn't have the time to put it in there. So if Blizzard wanted to put all of that stuff in, I think a lot of people, myself included, would go back and play it a little. But it doesn't make sense on the whole if you think about it. And if after this they announce Mist of Pandaria, that's when you can know I am right, and this is actually where Blizzard is trying to go. They want eventually Chromie time to be exactly that. You go to Chromie, you talk to Chromie, you say, hey, I want to go back to Cataclysm, or I want to go back to Classic Vanilla, and Chromie sends you back, and it is actually back, right? So you are in that old world. You have the old spells, you have everything old, and the game saves your progression in between the different phases. So, you can level at your heart's content. Basically, think of it as 7 or 8 games inside a single game. So now it is possible for a new player to really experience the old world as it was meant to be played, rather than having to, fumble around with, oh, I'll install Classic WoW, but I also want to install TBC and I also want to install Wrath. Rather than having all of these different versions, it will pretty much all be installed in your World of Warcraft experience, and it will be part of that experience. I think that could be a good thing. I think a lot of people would love that. Tangent over, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to specifically talk about the new player experience in World of Warcraft. So let's examine the new player experience as it exists right now, and then I'll tell you why I think Blizzard has been thinking ahead, and very cleverly so. Cleverly, is that the right word? I don't know. But they've been very intelligent in the way that they've designed Dragonflight. All right, the new player experience currently starts you off on the island, you finish the island, and then you get dumped into Battle for Azeroth. The problem with being dumped into Battle for Azeroth, you are pretty much immediately referred to as champion by characters that you have no collection of. You have no memory of these characters, you've never played with these characters, but all of these characters are referring to you as champion and talking to you about things that you have done that you obviously have not done. You're a brand new player. So this can be a very jarring experience if you're someone that sort of maybe don't even necessarily care about the story, but you care about the story enough that, because stories do build worlds and stories are important to people, it will be jarring enough that some people may just decide to opt out. Then you get to the actual zone, and if you're Alliance, you get thrown in prison for reasons, because you're a new player, you have no idea what these reasons are, but for some reason, this lady that was with you got you thrown in jail, and you have no idea what this actually is. If you're on the Horde side of things, you get to meet the Zandalari trolls and a king called Rashtakan, and people are referring to you as things, and you're just like, what the hell is this? I don't know any of these people, right? That's kind of the problem right now with the new player experience in World of Warcraft, and it doesn't get better from there, because as soon as you're done with Battle for Azeroth, you get dumped into Dragonflight. You've skipped the whole of the Shadowlands. Now you're in Dragonflight. And, well, that doesn't make any sense either, because you don't know anything about the dragons. What is the Dragon Isles anyways? And it isn't... This is where things really, I think, start to get better. But because you've had such a terrible experience with Battle for Azeroth, that experience isn't going to get any better with Dragonflight, because you're already dealing with massive confusions around just about everything. So, of course, the conversation has been from yesterday's stream and also from myself for a while now that Blizzard does need a new player experience. Now, originally, I said what Blizzard should do is they should go through all of the old world, literally every single zone, every single storyline. Pick the main stories that you think players require. So these are the storylines that need to be known by every single player, so the players can have a unified knowledge base at max level of everything that's happened in World of Warcraft. These things are important. Humans in our civilization building, in our tribe building, we require unified stories. Everyone needs to be able to agree on what the history of something is in order to feel a part of something. Right now, that is not something that the overwhelming majority of the WoW player base will be able to say, especially if they're somewhat new players. If they manage to slog through the new player experience, they won't know half of the stories that is actually out there. But this is where things change. And this is where, a lot of people in stream were like, well, Blizzard just needs to do everything from scratch. And I agreed to some extent. But then I started thinking about Dragonflight, the expansion, the Dragon Isles. And I specifically started thinking about the new, like the first time you get into the Dragon Isles and the quests that you get there, the way they refer to you. And this was actually very strange as an existing player. And that's how it came to me, was the dragons there refer to, like, they talk to me as if they do not know me. Even Alexstrasza at one point talks to you as if she has no idea who you are, right? And then after a bit of help, that's when she starts referring to you as champion. And, that's where you get back into the old, I am the champion, right? I have a big penis. But everyone refers to you like you're completely unknown. In fact, they don't even trust you necessarily all that much at the start. You have that whole quest line where you have to go fill in your name in a book and you have to choose your title and all the things that you think about yourself so that they can know who you are because you're brand new here. And then they send you off to go do seemingly very random small things at first, and it sort of ramps up slowly over time. But as you go through the early zones of the Dragon Isles, or the early periods of the zone in Dragon Isles, you slowly but surely get introduced to most of the dragon flights. There is actually some discussion about old lore in World of Warcraft, some harkenings back to the older days of World of Warcraft, and all of this is phenomenal if you're a new player, because as a new player, this will be your next new player experience. Right? You will come into the Dragon Isles not knowing anything about these isles, and they seemingly don't know anything about you either, which is helpful, right? Because you don't know them, they don't know you. It's time to get to know each other. But then as you move through and you get introduced to each of the dragon flights, you get introduced to a lot of the old lore of World of Warcraft. Obviously not all. There's no shot that a single expansion could tell you all the lore in World of Warcraft, but it introduces you to things like the Titans. It introduces you to things like the Void Lords and the Shadow. You get some introductions to at least mentions of the light and the cosmological forces. There's books all around and pages that you can read that discusses really some of the very early lore of World of Warcraft. Think about Tyr's books and Odin's books that you find very early on in the game. All of this is a phenomenal new player experience. Do yourself a favor if you don't agree with me. Make a new character and go into the Dragon Isles fresh, right? And just pay attention to the way the story plays out. It is actually quite amazing to see the story play out in front of you and realize that you're not the champion at this point, which is somewhat jarring, but also at the same time really does make a lot of sense. You're not the champion. And as a new player, this is what your experience will look like. You will finish the island, and then you'll be dumped into Dragon Isles. You will finish the Dragon Isle expansion, and then only will you move into the War Within. Now, it's not yet a perfect new player experience, but I think it's good enough. I think as a new player, that is the best experience you can hope for a game that's almost 20 years old. There needs to be some changes, though. Small changes, but some changes need to happen. I would like to see an announcement from Blizzard that now, with follower dungeons being an actual thing, maybe even follower raids becoming a thing for some of the older raids. But what I would love to see from Blizzard is all of the patches being unified into the leveling experience for a new player. So you don't just do the main storyline of the expansion and then move into the War Within. No, you have to finish all of the quests, the story quests specifically, for the main campaign of the Dragon Isles. Then you do all of the patches for the main campaigns, right? And then only, once you're done with everything right up until the last, that's when you move into the War Within. Because the patches really do a massive job of informing you about the world and the story and everything else that you need to know. And with the technology now, with follower dungeons and hopefully follower raids, it is possible to do that without making players wait hours and hours and hours to get dungeons together, hours and hours and hours to, well, maybe never even get a raid together. And that goes into the War Within. And then hopefully the War Within is also built in such a way that it can be a permanently playthrough expansion that really slots in nicely for a new player that wants to experience World of Warcraft. Now, you may be asking, Akelon, but what then happens to the old zones of World of Warcraft? Well, my friends, I think the old zones are going to become new zones, and I think Midnight is really the first piece of evidence we have of that. We know that Midnight is going back to Quel'Thalas, to the old world. There might be some new zones that's introduced there, but I do think Blizzard will slowly but surely, over the course of the next, 20 years, revamp the old world in a way that most of the old zones become new zones. Newly updated, newly reworked. We know that Blizzard have the AI technology for it now. They're employing that in Cataclysm with the upscaling worldwide. So it's going to become easier for Blizzard over time to revamp entire dungeons, revamp entire zones, remake entire zones, and then maybe make all of the old zones, make them more max level player experiences. So when you're at max level, there's things for you to do in there. There's gameplay to partake in there. It's a fun experiment and a fun experience for everyone. And there's so much that so many zones in World of Warcraft that is basically forgotten because during the original experience of World of Warcraft, these zones weren't super important to the story, so they have very sparse storytelling within them. And then obviously you do have phenomenal zones with phenomenal storytelling in them. But this is a chance for Blizzard to really redo all of that. And then you couple that with talking to Chromie and you being sent to the actual classic experience of World of Warcraft, and whoa, you've preserved the past in a capsule-like form that anyone can go back and enjoy. But you've also crafted a brand new experience for brand new players to really enjoy. And now you have the perk of hindsight. You know where you went wrong in the original experience. You know that Cataclysm was a big dud in terms of killing off the lore. So you don't do that again. You don't make that mistake again. You leave those zones and you craft those zones in such a way that they will always flow one into the other until you get to the max level stuff. I wanted to share that with you guys because it was a pretty lively discussion on the stream and it's an interesting topic. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. If you didn't, dislike. $1 a month gets you access to Patreon. You get nothing on Patreon except for the fact that you keep this channel free from sponsorships that want to sell you shit that you do not need. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.